Okay, recording.
Hi, this is the second part to the June 30th webinar, and we're just going to finish up with how to prevent AMA. So as we just saw and we were discussing about all of the different factors that can cause AMA to form in the stomach, such as eating large quantities of food or eating food with specific qualities, or even eating food when you are afflicted by certain emotions. In a similar manner, there's, as you see in your handout or in your textbook, the same thing is you would want to avoid those causative factors, and that would help to prevent AMA. So what is that? So for instance, you want to avoid overeating. So that was one of our first examples, looking at the Thanksgiving meal. You want to try and avoid eating large quantities of food. And typically, you know, we look at food that we can either hold in our hands, that quantity of food that is suitable for that individual. So we want to make sure that we do not eat excessive quantities of food. That would then make it very difficult for your Agni to digest and therefore produce AMA. You also want to avoid, again, similar as we talked about, food with specific qualities. So you want to avoid eating foods that are heavy to digest. That, again, is in large quantities. We want to avoid eating leftover, processed, canned, fast food. All of these come under the realm of unclean food. So as we were mentioning, you know, back in the ancient days when before they had processed food or before they had food with lots of pesticides, they termed it as unclean food, which also included food that was, you know, not washed or had dirt or had other remnants that was not suitable for somebody to consume it. That would be heavy to digest. So therefore, in our current state and current age, we have foods that also are included under that category, such as food with additives and artificial coloring and preservatives. Those are all considered unclean and unfit or unsuitable for consumption. Because if we consume those type of foods, it will produce AMA. It may not necessarily produce AMA immediately, but it can build, or even if it does produce AMA, you may not see the effects immediately, but what it does is it builds slowly and slowly and slowly until the point where it then gets a chance to accumulate and build enough that it starts to present or show signs and symptoms, which is exactly what we just saw earlier in how it can build and then translate down to the dhatus. Also, another factor, again, we do not want to have lots of cold water or even a lot of fluids while you're eating a meal. Because what that does is that actually further suppresses the Agni. So as we had talked about in the last weekend, you do not want to drink ice water. This is the reason why. You want to avoid ice water and you want to avoid large quantities of liquid while eating so that it doesn't further suppress the Agni. You do need to drink a little quantity of water, and ideally what they say in the classical texts is that you should have small quantities of water in between the morsels of food. However, you do not want to be reaching for a big jug or a big cup of water or whatever type of liquid that you're having with your meal. You do not want to fill up on that instead of eating your food. And in this season, I know it's very hard for you to do that. However, what that would do is just further, again, suppress the Agni or extinguish the Agni, and therefore would result in the production of AMA. Okay? You also want to try and eat warm, freshly cooked food. So the good thing about that is very easy to digest. It aids the Agni in the process of breaking down the food and digesting the food, and therefore will not produce more AMA. You want to try and have lunch as your main meal because that's the time when the Agni is it's the strongest, it's the most intense, and therefore you can actually digest a larger quantity of food, or you can you're able to really make use of all of that energy and use of all of that nutrition. You want to avoid eating heavier meals in dinner time, and the reason for that is because in the night when we sleep, our Agni tends to be lower due to lack of activity. and therefore your Agni cannot digest a larger quantity of food as well as heavier to digest food. This is again another reason why you see in certain cultures, and I know in India, the older generation always says this, do not eat yogurt at night. This is the reason why they would say that, because yogurt it's very hard to digest, it's heavy, and also it also blocks the channels, very similar to ama. So therefore, you do not want to consume those things at night. You also do not want to consume other types of food, which is heavy to digest in the nighttime, because of the lower intensity of Agni at that time, it would be more difficult to digest, and therefore it would result in ama. Similarly, you do not want to eat too late at night for the same purpose that the Agni won't be as strong. You want to eat with a calm mind. So the great thing is, as I had observed in your class, you all were very present and very aware of when you're consuming your food, and that's wonderful, because as we saw, emotions has a huge part to play in how it affects your digestion. So being afflicted by anger, grief, sorrow, envy, confusion, being hyper, all of these different emotions can also affect the intensity of your Agni and can also affect the process of digestion. So it's not just the physical components, but it's also the emotional aspect that does affect digestion. So you want to try and keep a calm mind when you're eating. It's the same thing what they always say, you don't approach something when your mind is disturbed or when you're agitated. It's the same thing. You do not want to be eating food when you're agitated, because just like you cannot do anything properly when your mind is agitated, it's the outcomes of that is not good. Similarly, if you're eating food while you're agitated or while your mind is agitated, the outcome or the byproduct of that also would not be the best. Okay? You want to try and eat in more regular cycles. Basically, you want to try and be able to eat at a regular time. And as you increase your Agni, or as you create this habit of eating at these specific time periods, what happens is that your body starts to develop a habit and emotion so that you feel hungry at these specific times in the day. And because of keeping that routine, your body really is like a machine. It's whatever you train it to do, it's going to do that. So by trying to create the schedule and trying to create a routine, it really helps your body to know and to expect, well, this is what I'm going to eat in the morning. This is the time that I need to be hungry. And you're going to start to see that cycle starts to happen. So you start to feel hungry at specific time intervals in the day, and that really helps to aid in digestion. It helps to aid in the processing of the food and moving it out in a specific time period so that it gets digested and it gets absorbed, and then it produces the right amount of waste product that is then moved out. So you see, in that cyclic process, your body then it knows and it expects to be fed and to be nourished at these particular time periods. So it really helps to have become like a very well-oiled machine. This would be the process that you would be creating by trying to keep that sort of dietary cycle. And again, you try to avoid eating when you're upset. And as we discussed, emotions has a huge part to play in how your food is digested. So as we mentioned earlier, even if you're eating the healthiest food in the world, that is the most nutritious, that is organic, that is very clean, that is cooked in the most appropriate manner, and you have the best Agni in the world, if you are afflicted by these emotions, it can also produce ama. Okay? So you want to try and as much as possible to create this great environment. Now, this seems very complicated. It seems very convoluted. Oh, well, there are so many factors. How are we ever going to get this perfect? But as we saw, your body really does tell you exactly what it wants. So we had a question that, how do you know, or how can we approach this? What is the simplest way for us to understand or try to prevent ama, or to know what is the right way to eat? Well, the simplest way to do that is by just being aware of what your body is telling you. Your body, when you feel you have cravings and when you feel hungry, there's usually something that you feel like you want to eat. Your body tells you, okay, I think I want to, I think I want to have pasta today, or I think I want to eat a salad, or I think I would really like, I could really go for a soup. Or it'll tell you, you have certain cravings. And when you get that craving, or when you do feel hungry, just take a step back and try to trace that back and see where that feeling is coming from. Is it something psychological, that you're craving something because of a deficiency, or to try and fill or pacify an emotion? That's why you're craving this particular food. Or is it something that your body is craving, that you're feeling physically inside? So for instance, like if you're really hungry or you're really depleted, you feel like eating the pasta as opposed to eating the salad because of the fact that you want something that's more substantial. Okay, so for those of you who have Tikshna, you know exactly what I'm talking about. But in that sense, again, your body's telling you that you need to have something substantial because it feels depleted. So the simplest thing to do, first, let us try to create that habit of being aware and really paying attention to what our body is telling us. Because even more so than I can tell you or a practitioner can tell you, your body really does guide you and tell you exactly what it needs and what it wants, and what is conducive to your health and what is not. So just try to create that awareness. And the more you start to look at yourself, and the more you start to pay attention to what your body's telling you, the more you're going to start to see the differences of when you listen to it and when you don't. Okay? So that's one of the simplest way for us to understand and to try and apply all of these different concepts that you're learning. Okay, so I hope you've gotten a chance to really get a sort of a comprehensive idea of what ama is. It's a very important concept in Ayurveda, and it really is a key role. It plays a key role in whether a person is healthy or if they are in a state of unhealthiness or aswastha, or a state of imbalance. Okay, so I hope you all have a very good night, and we will be seeing you soon. Take care.